Hello and welcome to Journalism 606, Week 15. We have all made it to Week 15. This week we're going to try to wrap things up with a good discussion, a great discussion, I hope, of Jeff Jarvis's book, Geeks Bearing Gifts. As that book suggests, we are here to rethink everything, or as I say in this headline, rethink everything. I was typing something in the slideshow that you're about to see, and typing everything, I typed everything. Sometimes I type homonyms as I'm typing. It's one of my more frequent mistakes and typos. And I almost corrected it, and I thought, no, rethink everything. Well, that kind of sums it up, and that really sums up Jeff Jarvis's book. So let's jump right into it. Obviously he does want you to rethink everything. His approach is iconoclastic. He wants to take all of our notions within the realm of conventional wisdom and just put it on its head. He is fond of challenging assumptions. He's fond of heresy. I'll talk in a couple of slides about how he not only advocates advocacy in journalism, but vigorously advocates advocacy. And that many journalists, especially if you're a traditionally minded journalist, if you believe in objectivity and the notions of journalism with a capital J, that is outright heresy to mix advocacy with journalism. But he puts it out there and he makes a case for it. He is about upsetting all the apple carts. He wants to turn all those sacred cows that journalism and that media has, wants to turn all the sacred cows into hamburger. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about his approach. His approach is not that of a futurist. He is not making predictions. He's not coming out with solutions. He is basically, and he's upfront about this. Early in the book, first couple of pages, he says that, this isn't about solutions. You're not going to find any solutions in here. He wants people to start asking questions, and not only asking the questions, but asking the right questions. And that's how we get to a solution. So one of his early chapters is, he butchers Spanish a little bit and says, no más mass media, or no más mass media. Anyway, he wants to toss out the notion that mass media is a viable model going into the future. He quotes sociologist Raymond Williams on the first page of his chapter, saying that there are, in fact, no masses. There are only ways of seeing people in masses. The point there is that people should be treated as individuals, and that's the best way to think about them. So he says, again, that the notion of mass media is outmoded. The focus, again, should be on the micro level, on the individual level, on the niche, rather than the broad brush. Nichification is not a word that he uses, but I'm going to throw that word there. It's a word that I've seen and that I've liked, that I've noticed in other academic writings. And I think it works here for what Jarvis is trying to say. He would rather us go macro, rather than speaking to hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people, some of the largest media that we have. He suggests, actually he insists, that we talk to the individual, that we find out about the individual, that we address his or her unique needs, and that's how we build a relationship with our audience, not as a mass media, but as a targeted media to the individuals. And to do that, we have to know a lot about the individuals. We'll talk about that in a couple of slides. Again, one of his quotes from an interview that I saw, and I don't think from the book, but serve the small community and serve them well. Instead of focusing on volume, we should focus on value, providing value, more specifically, providing a high level of service to each individual person in our audience. He wants to throw out the idea of content. He says that the value of content these days in the information age is compromised and rapidly devalues almost the second that it hits the internet. It is grabbed, it is forwarded, it is repeated, and it is really hard to treat content as a commodity in the current ecosystem. He wants to focus on other things. He wants to focus on data journalism. We'll talk about that in a couple of slides. Again, providing services, but building a media or a medium around content is, in his mind, arguably not a strong economic model. He talks about curation. The revered notion of gatekeeping, he also says, is outmoded. Again, you're getting the idea with Jarvis. He says everything's outmoded, right? Certainly a consistent theme throughout the book. People tend to do their own gatekeeping anyway. So if not gatekeeping, what is he talking about? Again, he's talking about curation. And when he says that, museums, if you're a curator at a museum, you're searching for, you're gathering, you select, you authenticate, you add context and explanations to, and present and recommend whatever the items are that that's in their collection. And these, he says, are all the skills that are needed in news today, in a new and very messy ecosystem of many voices, some good, some reliable, but many not. I might argue that his notion of curation and gatekeeping, as most people and most scholars understand it, are very, very similar. I think you're almost getting into semantics there, but certainly I think curation gets more at the craft and the finesse that I think journalists are going to have to operate in to serve their audiences. And again, it is all about service, not necessarily about content, according to Jarvis. The focus should be on providing a service and a utility to improve people's lives. This builds trust in the medium and, in turn, return business, right? The focus should be on listening and responding to the individual, less as a mass market medium and more like, for instance, perhaps a valued friend. This, of course, would build trust, and this, of course, hopefully would help with the economic model to sustain journalism and to sustain media organizations. So, Jarvis's primary thesis, it's not about content. It's maybe a little bit about technology, but it's a lot about relationships, not content. And that is a place where that we should focus. We should focus on establishing relationships with our audience much the same way that Facebook does. Facebook, as we've seen in some of our readings and our discussions and our viewings on other videos, Facebook speaks to people's emotional selves, speaks to their emotional needs, and earns a lot of trust that way. Now, we all know that Facebook is all about data mining, yet people sometimes inexplicably really trust Facebook. And that's just a very, very powerful way to illustrate how important establishing relationships are and establishing a community of relationships are to media as we move forward. Media should know more about their users. By knowing more about their users on an individual level, they can really target a user's emotional needs. The more that we know about the user, the better we can deliver value to them. This may give people some very a proper sense of pause about privacy issues. Certainly, Facebook gets a lot of attention about whether or not people trust Facebook, whether or not the data mining is necessarily a good thing. This to me is probably a vulnerability in this argument, and it's something that's going to have to be overcome if media organizations go down this route. I suggest that they probably should. Facebook knows an awful lot about me. Google knows an awful lot about me. Therefore, they're a little bit better at serving my needs. I am willing to make that trade-off. Should I trust them? You can go either way on that. I've been able to rationalize the trade-off, and I've made secure what I can as an individual. I've made my own decisions about the extent that my trust goes. My trust only, by the way, goes so far. I don't put everything out there, but I do put enough out there for them to serve me, and I think they do provide a good service. But not everybody is there, and I know a lot of people are not of a mind to do that. So again, that is a criticism, or a tension point, actually, more properly a tension point in this perspective. Just something to think about. So exactly as I promised, we're going to talk about heresy. Now, Jarvis's brand of heresy is, in a nutshell, the advocacy of advocacy. He says that journalism has always been about advocacy. Journalism advocates for citizens, on behalf for fairness, for justice, on behalf of the little guy, for the unempowered. Journalists historically have taken on the establishment. And Jarvis says that that is a good thing, and that we as journalists and in journalism should embrace that. It's not just about relaying knowledge anymore. It's not just about educating about current events. It's about providing a service to people and advocating and making people's lives better throughout society. Jarvis feels that journalists should not only engage with and interact with the public and with their audiences, but straight out collaborate and partner more with the public. Journalists should approach this partnership in a feeling of stewardship and service, and to provide a service to the public. That should be their mission. He also says, rather than subscribers, we in journalism would do well to think about the audience as partners, or maybe as members, just like the public media. The user of the media can play more of a role in the journalism and actively participate in the media, more than just commenting on stories or trolling, as we sometimes see. Questions to ponder, and this is just something that's not going to be an assignment. I'm just going to throw this out to you as some things to think about. Again, Jarvis takes some fairly controversial positions throughout his book. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but should journalists become community organizers? Do you think that there is a place for journalists, or do you think there's a place for journalism to do that? Should journalists be more participatory rather than advisory? Should objectivity go out the window? Just some things to think about, and I'd love to see anything that you want to share online or in Slack. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts about this. Okay, the article. The article has long been revered as a staple, or probably one of the most important tools in the toolbox for a journalist. Well, Jarvis, again, wants to take some pot shots at the article. He says he doesn't think that the article should go away. There will always be a place for content. There should always be a place for an article, but the article is no longer the only tool in the toolbox. He says that there are other tools for journalists, and he specifically and at some length talks about data. Data can be curated, can be made available and put into the hands of the audience as a tool, as a way to empower and to help the audience and society in general accomplish things within a community, accomplish things that they couldn't do without the data. So it is a tool for empowerment. So certainly the main message, for that matter, the main challenge of Jarvis's book is to adapt. He challenges and takes journalists to task, and all those working within journalism to task on clinging to steadfastly to the old ways of doing things. He says that we shouldn't be working to sustain the old ways of doing things or to find ways to finance or fund the old ways of doing things. He says that we should say goodbye to them. Throw everything out, throw away all of your assumptions, and find new efficiencies, things that we haven't thought about yet. Find new roles, new ways of connecting and serving your audience. The book, in my opinion, is probably a way to start the conversation. It's a better architecture for problem solving than it is offering any real solutions. To be fair, Jarvis is very upfront about that, as I said before, early in his book. He says, I'm not offering solutions here, I just want to get the conversation started. And you cannot arrive at the right solution without asking the right questions. Obviously, we are needing innovation. Most people feel that we are still working on the solutions. Whatever the solutions are, clearly, we don't know what they are yet. We're in this weird place in our evolution in the media where technology has highly disrupted the industry. The advertising business model has been disrupted as a result. We have kept that advertising business model since colonial days. Any business model that you've held on to for roughly 400 years, it's going to take you a little bit of time to regroup and figure things out. In sociology, they have it. Some of you may be familiar with it if you've had these classes or the training in sociology. You may be familiar with the term culture lag, and that is the notion that society, after there is some sort of disruptive technology, it lags for a little bit. People kind of freak out. There's a sustained period of dysfunction, and society basically needs a little bit of time to catch up with the technical innovations. We are in the middle of that culture lag now, in my opinion, as an educator, and I do think that we will find a solution. Technology will always change, but human nature is probably not going to change. Humans have always been storytellers, historically or prehistorically. They're, the very famous cave drawings. Since before we could write, we had been storytellers. And those storytelling practices are probably not going to go away. Human nature will not change that much as a result of the technology. Human nature is also to adapt. We could fool you sometimes, but humans, by and large, tend to be a fairly adaptive species. I do feel that we will adapt. I do feel that we will find a solution. History tells us that the solutions are here. We just have to know where to look. So with that, I will leave you and move on, and that is all for now. So you have, here's some parting words before I go. With this class, I think I'm safe in saying that you have an edge. Very few journalism programs offer focused training in management or leadership. Um, it's unclear if all of you will go into leadership. Some of you might. Some of you may be perfectly happy staying in management. Others might not go in either direction, but you might want to know what a good manager looks like, what a good culture looks like, what a destination workplace looks like. I hope that this class gives you some things to think about. I hope that this class gives you some ways to also model your thinking about the future. In Built to Last, we talked about how to put together a business that is, well, in fact, built to last. With Geeks Bearing Gifts, what might be the innovative approaches to finding new solutions. I hope this has given you a lot to think about, and I can't wait to read the rest of your writing. I will be very busy in the coming few days, working to deliver your work back to you, and everything that I've read so far has really inspired me. I love hearing you guys think. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being such amazing students. This is my first online class. This is my first management class, and this is my first graduate class, and kind of a hat trick. And I think we got through it, and I really appreciate each and every one of you. So let's go ahead and have a great finish to the class as we wrap up the work. Please keep in touch, and I wish you happy trails and have a great summer. Bye.